I'm Sean Myles, and I'm a researcher here in Nova Scotia. I'm an assistant professor in the Faculty of Agriculture at Dalhousie University, and I'm the Canada Research Chair for Agricultural Genetic Diversity. So, what are we doing in our lab? What we're doing is we're trying to figure out how to make food better, quicker. So, a lot of every item that you see on your plate when you eat your food generally comes from a breeding program. Somebody has gone and actually bred that crop for you. They've made a decision about what parents to combine together to actually make offspring, and those offspring are then selected. We select the best ones to be used as your food items. We work on apples and grapes, and some of you probably know about some apple varieties like Macintosh or Honeycrisp, or these different apples that you see in the grocery store. They're all the result of breeding programs. And so what we're interested in doing is figuring out how to make a really great apple, but make it quicker than what we're doing now. So in breeding, and especially in apple breeding, it takes a really long time to breed an apple. And the information we use is often very fuzzy, sort of make crosses between various things, and we plant out lots of offspring, and we wait a really long time for these trees to grow up. It takes about 7 years for an apple tree to be mature if you grow it from seed. So what we want to be able to do is tell you, look at the DNA, look at the genomes of all of these different trees, and tell the breeder when the trees are only this big in the greenhouse, we can tell them which ones are going to be winners and which ones are going to be losers. Right? So that's our big goal. We're not able to do that yet, but that's what we're aiming towards. And the methods that we develop in the lab and the computational software programs and things like that we develop are not only applicable to apples, but applicable to all sorts of other things. And of course, this affects Canadians in our everyday life, because what we're doing is aiming to breed apples that not only look good and taste good, but also require less chemical input to grow. Because right now, we spray our apples a lot in order to get them to look the way that they do in the grocery store. But we can figure out how to breed apples more efficiently. We can actually start generating apples that look really good and don't need to be sprayed a lot out in the field. And that's good for everybody. So what inspired me to get into this kind of research was actually my wife, who was at the time my girlfriend, and she was studying to be a winemaker. And we lived in Europe, and she lived in this wonderful wine region in Europe, and I would go and I was a PhD student in Europe, and I would go and I would visit her. And we would go on bike rides through these wonderful vineyards, and we'd be drinking all these nice wines. And it made me think, has anyone ever looked into the genetics of grapes? I worked on the genetics of humans. But I thought, it'd be interesting to know, has anybody ever looked at the genetics of grapes? And so that's what really inspired me, was all this fantastic tastes and flavors and all the different types of wines, to see, has anyone ever looked at what are the genetic causes of all this variation, these wonderful tastes and aromas and things like this. And so I still do some work in grapes, but I've shifted over a little bit towards more towards apples. Apples are a big industry here in Nova Scotia. So, but we work a little bit on both still. So what's the next big question in our field? What we really want to be able to do is predict what an apple will look like by just sequencing its DNA when it's a little tiny seed, or a little tiny seedling when it's just sprouted, just germinated. That's what we want to be able to do, and we can't do that yet, but we want to see over the next decade or so, how well can we predict what a tree is going to look like before it even grows up, right? And that's our main goal. Thanks for listening.